Okay, just to clarify, he does not have a Southern American accent. Okay, this is a British accent. Okay, just if you have time of that. Or anybody else. So he studied at the London School of Economics. He studied economics and philosophy. Okay, and he currently works for a large international financial firm. Guess in what? Leadership consultant. They pay the guy to consult leaders in a global financial company how to be better leaders, how to be more successful in the work they do. And he's here to share that very same insights with all of us, how we can be better leaders as men, as family, husbands, spouses, brothers, sons, co-workers, devotees, etc. So in all seriousness, we're really fortunate. I was mentioning to somebody at breakfast, when I first became a devotee in the last century, you know, it's like how much, you ask somebody, how much experience do you have? They say, I'm 21. I've been around the world a lot. Those are the old, right, Manchana? Those are the old guys. If you were 21, you were like, whoa. I remember there was one of the Sankirtan devotees who was 28. And when he'd come back from the airport, the student books, he'd take a hot shower. We thought that was the funniest thing in the world. He was so old that he had to take a hot shower to relax. Seriously, I'm not making up. You know? So now, we didn't have a lot of seniority. Now we have, like, you know, neurologists coming and speaking to us, and professional people who talk about how to be silly to professional organizations. And now we have Bhuta Bhavana who talk about how, as a professional leadership consultant, how we can apply that information in our own lives. So let's give Bhuta Bhavana a nice, warm round of applause. I think we should applaud louder because we may want him not to wait 7 years to come back. So let him appreciate it.
Okay, so can everyone hear me? Okay, so I want to begin by saying thank you to the organizers, to our elders, seniors in the room, for being present and also for helping to spearhead and make this happen. It's going to be a very interactive session. I'm just going to share this up front. We're going to share different things, but we're going to ask you to also be very much involved in the discussions, be very much involved in the exercises that we're going to do for this particular session. We'll actually get into that in a moment. First thing we'll do is we'll do some prayers. Very important in our tradition that we recite these Mangalacharya prayers, because Mangalacharya means literally an auspicious invocation. The whole idea is that when we recite these invocation prayers, we're requesting the blessings of our Guru Parampara. And by getting their blessings,
this is really rude to do, but I have to interrupt.
Okay.
Because he's talking about appreciating the Parampara, and we should offer appreciation to Anuradha Mataji, who's there, who's in charge of the snack bar. Anuradha. We know that the real reason she's doing this is because Jai Krishna Prabhu told her, we're trying to get a few more devotees to stay in New Vrindaban, do what you can. So if you're really overwhelmed by the snack bar, see Jai Krishna's right here, they'd love to sign you up to stay. Okay? And Anuradha's going to promise to have snacks like this every day for anybody that stays, right? Thank you, Anuradha. It's fantastic. Really, it's fantastic. I don't know where you found those little helicopters, but those are really cute.
thank you, it's okay, no worries. So we're going to make it interactive. And I'll explain this after we say the Mangalacharya. And the whole idea here is that by getting the blessings of Parampara, it makes it more likely and increases the probability that we can actually leave these programs, these retreats, these seminars slightly progressive as compared to who we were when we first came in. Okay, so you know these Mangalacharya prayers, we say them before class in the morning program. So we'll say them together. Then we'll speak a little bit about how we're trying to approach this training, this particular session also on transformation through talents, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we'll just say together then, but one thing, when we say these prayers, please try and do it as attentively as possible. Because the more attentively anything is done in devotional service, the more powerful and transformative the particular results will be. Okay. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha
Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Bhagavatam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sakajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sijivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadeti Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
So I want to begin by saying thank you to all of you. To put it very simply, when we do these interactive seminars and classes, workshops in our movement, one of the things to notice is that the person who's speaking or sharing, they actually gain the most. Because whenever we have a presentation, whenever we're interactive, whenever we're sharing with other people, it's one of the best ways for us to learn that same material ourselves. What we're going to do therefore is, as we go through the session today, is we're going to make it very interactive. We tend to recall about 70% of what we discuss. We tend to recall about 80% of what we experience. But we tend to recall about 90 to 95% of what we share with other people. So in one sense, well actually distinctly, the best way to learn anything is to do what? Is to teach it, right? And it's very interesting, if you look at it, you'll see that many of the principles that they find in the modern world directly relate to what we hear in our teachings. Right? Krishna says, those who give this transcendental secret to my devotees, they are what? They are the most dear to me. So we actually see immediately a direct correlation that when we share something, especially when we share in the association of the devotees, when we share in the association of those who are trying to progress on the spiritual journey, we gain so much more. As I said, it's going to be interactive. If you can, I'm going to ask you all to have something to write with. Okay, so if you want to get that out, pen, paper, if you can't do that, your mobile phone will also do. Okay? But as we said, we want it to be interactive because we tend to have a big issue in our institution. The issue we have, and it's a danger, is that we can hear so many things without necessarily imbibing any of what we're learning. Or let's say, that's a bit hard. Maybe we imbibe a certain percentage, but not what we could take away. And if that continues on year in, year out, then we start to wonder, does the process actually work? I've been doing this for so long, and it doesn't seem to have moved the needle. I don't seem to have changed so much, and I'm wondering, is it me or is it the process? One of the ways in which we can transform with the teaching, one of the most easy ways to transform with the teaching is to be a very active participant in any learning experience. Okay, I like to study the parallels between our Vaishnava tradition and modern psychology, modern neuroscience, etc. One of the interesting things I came across recently, according to neuroscience, whenever you are attentive, right, whenever you do anything with attention, it increases what is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity simply means that your brain becomes more receptive and more impressionable. Now it's interesting, where have we heard constantly about the importance of being attentive? Where does Prabhupada emphasize that? Chanting. Do you see the connection? So oftentimes in our tradition we hear certain things, not in our tradition, in our communities, we may hear certain things, but we may not understand why. When we hear something, that can immediately have some impact on the mind. But when we understand the why behind something, the reason why we are meant to do something in a particular way, that stimulates the intelligence. Okay? And that means that when we do something with that attentiveness, you're actually creating a deep, what we call samskar. Or in neuroscience, they call it like a neural pathway. You're deepening the neural pathways which create that new habit. So when we are in Bhagavatam class, or we're chanting, but we're not attentive, we don't get the same transformative effect as we would otherwise. That is why in our tradition, constantly, there's emphasis on not just hearing, but hearing attentively. Not just reading, but reading attentively. Furthermore, according to, in our tradition also, but according to modern psychology, if you start to think about what you've heard, that also deepens the impression. So in Sanskrit, we talk about manana. Manana means reflection or contemplation. So it's one thing to hear, shravana. Then you do manana. I reflect on, I think about what I've actually heard. What does this mean for me? How would I apply that? You know, what are some examples that I've seen in my own life? Then the third stage is called nididhyasana. Nididhyasana means practical application in the world. So I've heard it, I've thought about it, and then I put it into practice in my day-to-day life. So there is literally an ecosystem of transformation. What tends to happen again is that we tend to do part one, and we do that inattentively. So we may do some shravana, but we're not fully paying attention. But if we were to do all three stages, and were to do that consistently, we would start to see that the very things that we hear, the very teachings that we read, would move us, and would start to act on us much, much more. One other thing to add to this is that when we chant attentively, it actually, that attentiveness has a way of penetrating the subconscious mind. Okay? So attentive chanting, attentive hearing, attentive service has a way of penetrating through to your subconscious mind, which again accelerates the transformation that each and every one of us can experience from the same devotional service. So to lock this off, what tends to happen in our communities again and again is that we have tremendous powerful teaching, but we have an issue in terms of application. Okay? So it's not the teaching that's the issue. It's often the misapplication of the teaching, which tends to slow us down from getting the full benefit of the power of Srila Prabhupada's teachings. So, as we said, we're going to make this very interactive. We're going to ask you at certain times to write certain things down. At certain points, we're going to ask you to break up into small groups and discuss. Ultimately, we want you to do a specific thing. And that is, we want you to personalize your practice. Okay? In other words, we talk about impersonalism. And we often think about impersonalists that, the Mayavadis, they're impersonalists. Or we say impersonalism that we're not dealing with each other personally. But there's a third type of impersonalism, which is where I don't take this entire teaching and apply it specifically to where I am in the journey of Krishna consciousness at this time. And if there's a misapplication, it then leads to issues. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has stated that one of the causes of fall down is acting beyond our level of qualification, but he also says another cause of fall down is acting above our level of qualification. So even when we do more than we're qualified to do, or less than we're qualified to do, both things can cause stagnation in spiritual life. Okay, so I'm just going to check in with you. If there's anyone in the room who thinks, you know what, I didn't pay to be interactive, I'm not willing to think about what we're hearing and how it applies to me, I'm not willing to interact with the other people in the room, I'm not willing to discuss it. If there's anyone in the room who feels that they're not ready to do that, then you need to tell me now, because otherwise from this point onwards, we're going to get into a very interactive and immersive training experience on this topic. Going once? Going twice? Okay, excellent. So what we're going to do is, as we go through this, I'm going to throw out some questions to you. We're not going to be speaking at you. We're going to be having a dialogue with you as it relates to this particular topic. And just a disclaimer, I've slightly reworked the presentation because the wonderful presentation given by Prasanatha yesterday touched upon some things I was going to discuss, so I've broadened out the scope of the presentation slightly, but I think you'll still find it to be useful and also beneficial. So, we've talked about the framework, how we're going to learn. We've asked you to grab pen and paper or something to write with. Let's get into this in a bit more detail. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to do an exercise for me. Actually, I'm going to take this off the screen first. So, this exercise, we will look at the results of this exercise further on in the presentation. But what I'm going to ask you to do is the following. I'm going to ask you to just take a moment to imagine that today is your funeral. Nice and positive and optimistic, right? I'm going to ask you to imagine that today is your funeral. But before you write anything down, I'm going to ask you to really take this seriously. As we go through the session today, there are various exercises that we're going to do together. And these exercises, they can help us to understand certain things, certain dynamics that could be useful for us to know about ourselves and also about our life as well. So, I'm going to ask you to imagine that today is your funeral, okay? You're present at your own funeral. And I'm going to ask you to think carefully about the following. I'm going to ask you to think, if this was your last day, right? So today's your funeral. I'm going to ask you in a moment, not yet, but in a moment to write down what are your biggest successes and deepest regrets. That's one thing I'm going to ask you to write down. The second thing I'm going to ask you to write down, again, considering that today is your funeral, what would those in attendance be saying and thinking and feeling about you? Okay? When you write this down, I'm going to ask you to be as honest as possible. The more honest you are throughout the session, the more benefit you will gain from the program. Okay, third thing. This is really important, this third one. Today is your funeral. You've done part 1 and 2. I'm going to ask you to also think, what would you have liked people to be saying, thinking, and feeling about you at that time? Okay? This is why I asked you to have pen and paper or something to write with. I'm going to give you, we'll start with 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write down your answers to these questions, and then we will take a step on. So pen and paper or mobile phone, whatever it is, write down your answers to these questions on the screen right now. And again, please be as honest as possible. The more honest we are, there's some paper at the side, I believe there, so if anyone needs, there's more papers. If you need to grab a paper, please do so. There's also some pens in the corner there as well. Today's your funeral. You left the world, but you're able to tune in and you're able to hear and see what's going on. First of all your biggest successes and your deepest regrets. So if you passed away today, write down your answer to those questions. What am I happy about in my life? Where are the regrets coming from? What have I thought, you know what, I regret the X, Y, Z. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, the people at your funeral, what are they saying, thinking, and what are they feeling about you at that time? That's the second part of the exercise. And the third one, what would you have liked people to be saying, thinking, and feeling about you at this time? Okay? So write down your answers to those questions, and again, as we said, as honestly as possible. And we will come back and reference that at a later point in the session today. A couple more minutes to just do that. take my cue from the room. When I see the majority of you looking forward, I'll take it that you've written your notes.
That second bullet is that what we would think that people would say?
Yes, yes. You're trying to, with the second one, you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of the people that you know who will be at your funeral. What are they saying about you, but also what are they thinking? Because sometimes what people say, what they think is very, very different. What are they saying, what are they thinking, and what are they feeling about you? And again, this is on the basis that we imagine that you passed away today. Okay. Give you another minute or so. And even though you're writing this down now, this is something that you may want to work on, refine, add to, even outside of the session as well. Okay, so we're starting it now, just to get some baseline ideas, but you're more than welcome in your own time to do some further writing down or work on this particular topic. We'll give you another 30 seconds, and then we're going to take a step on the presentation. Like I said, we'll do various activities, written activities. So if anyone needs more pen and paper, I know that there's some pens in the corner over there at the table. There's also some paper as well. If you want to grab that at any point, feel free to do so. So let's get into this. I've asked you to think about the idea that you're at your own funeral, etc., etc. First of all, how did that feel? Okay, so I don't know about the intellectual side of it, but when I told you to consider that you are at your own funeral right now, how did that feel? This is where you speak. Interactive, yes.
It's a little startling.
Yeah.
Because we don't think in those terms, especially if it's today. We think it's 50 years from now.
Well, some of us, yeah. But many of us, we don't do that. So it definitely can be startling. And then to not come to this side. How did you feel?
Whoa, I'm on the time.
Okay. Definitely. That sense of time's gone, right? Absolutely. I saw your hand up, sir.
Inspired to be better.
Oh, inspired to be better as well. Interesting. Prabhupada talks about this point on many occasions. I'll take person up, but then I'll say yes. You say. I'm asking you to check your voice though, so everyone can hear.
Yes, so in urology, I see death every day. Like every week, 3 people die in my hands.
Mm-hmm.
So my driving force every day is like, what if I die today?
Yeah.
Right? That's why I try to do everything, for last 15 years. So I don't have any regrets, and I live my life fully. And also, what people think is not in my hands. I don't care about other people what they think about whether I live my life fully or not. Right?
And this is the direction we're going to get in. So let's just touch upon this. The reason why we did, one of the reasons, we're going to use many things from this exercise as we go through. One of the reasons why we did this is because this is a reality actually. The reality is one day this will be coming true. That's the first point. Second point, none of us know when that particular day is, right? Even if you look at an astrologer, they may tell you something, it may or may not be true. But we can use this understanding. Prabhupada often speaks about this understanding or bringing to our attention the reality that death can come at any moment and will come at some point. You know, it's interesting. We think about the Bhagavatam. Pariksit Maharaj is cursed to die in how many days? 7 days, right? So he's cursed to die in 7 days. But you know what is interesting? Every single one of us in the room, we're also going to die in 7 days. Sounds strange, right? Yeah. But it's true. It'll be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So one of these 7 days, we're going to leave. And we can tell a lot about what goes on in our consciousness, what goes on deep down within us by these kinds of exercises. It's exactly what was explained by Yudhishthira Maharaj in Mahabharata. That the most amazing thing Everyone sees people are going to pass away all the time, yet every single one of us, in our day-to-day lives, we act as if we're going to live forever. I wanted to start with this activity on purpose to help to inspire a sense of healthy urgency. And I use that word very carefully. Not urgency. Urgency could be in three modes. Just like you can have urgency in the mode of ignorance, where I just become overwhelmed and I don't care about anything. There can be urgency in the mode of passion. In some countries where there was some kind of crisis, when people thought they were going to die, they just tried to have as much sense gratification as they could before they passed away. That's urgency in the mode of passion. What we're looking at here is the urgency in the mode of goodness, which helps us to focus on the things which are most important. Okay? So this understanding that time is not going to be there for us forever, if we lived with this type of understanding, it could very much change the way that we show up in the world. And I want to churn this a little bit before we go on. What I'm going to ask you to do is just turn to someone next to you. We'll just give you 5 minutes for this. And again, I want you to personalize your practice. So when you answer this question, don't give general answers, give specific answers. So the question is very simple. If I lived with the sattvic understanding, like a mode of goodness understanding, that my life could change at any time, I could leave the world at any time. Okay? What would I be doing differently? If I lived with this type of understanding at the back of my mind, in the mode of goodness. The mode of goodness means I'm not just becoming terrified, I'm not panicking. It's the urgency in the mode of goodness. So I'm taking this, but in a way that's with awareness, with knowledge, with balance, with understanding. If I had that kind of understanding, and if I lived with that understanding, just share with your partner, how would that change the way that I live my day-to-day life? We will give you 5 minutes to share with someone sitting next to you, maybe the person right next to you, just to share, and again, keep it personal. What would be changing? What would you be doing differently? How would you be showing up differently? Your 5 minutes to discuss with the person next to you starts now. Yeah. 2 minutes one way, 2 minutes the other way.
Yes, and then I'll talk to you.
over. What's Max? Max, okay. Thank you.
You have one minute left. 1 minute left.
I'm not going to leave kids, don't worry. But I wanted to draw your attention. I'm going to ask everyone to tune back in. I wanted to draw your attention. Just, again, this interaction that we just had, was there a lot of energy in your discussion? Yes or no? Yes. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I was saying right at the beginning. We just took one simple idea, right? Something that you've heard in probably many of our doctrine classes throughout ISKCON. This idea that death can come at any moment. But then we turned it into an activity, an exercise, and a discussion. Just the fact that we took that, we unpacked that idea and started to discuss it and explore it practically and personally means that just by this one technique, it will leave a deeper impression in the consciousness. And this is actually what we're meant to do with the teaching. This is the idea of transformation. That we're meant to be active participants in the philosophy, lifestyle, and practices of Krishna consciousness in order to get the full fruit and benefit of what the teachings have for us. Okay? We're going to take it a step one. The reason why we're doing all of this is to really gain deeper perspective. All we've done is touch upon one thing that we've all heard before, which we know to be true. We know it empirically to be true, that everyone passes away from this world at some point. We've seen friends, family, other people pass away. We see our own body getting older, but it doesn't necessarily take hold. Why? Because we live two lives. As devotees, we live two lives. We live a conscious life, Will I say and think on the conscious level, but there's a much deeper aspect to all of us, which is what is happening for us subconsciously. And the real transformation occurs to the extent that the teachings enter into the subconscious. And that is also explained in scripture, but it's explained using different words. It talks about the journey from the head to the heart. Right? Sometimes the term that's used is chitta, sometimes the term that's used is hridaya. It literally means the consciousness, but it actually means the deep consciousness. Right? What you believe very, very deep down within you is shown by what we do on a day-to-day basis. So again, to this particular point, someone who really believes that life can go at any moment, they live their life in a different way. Right? They spend their time in a different way, and they're conscious in a different way. What we have to do, ladies and gentlemen, between now and when we leave the world, is take that journey from the head through to the heart, so that the philosophy becomes literally embodied in who we are on a day-to-day basis. So that change of perspective is necessary because it also relates to our topic today. We're talking about engaging talents in Krishna's service. And there's many different words which relate to this topic. We often hear about doing your dharma. In the modern world, there are literally millions of pounds or dollars paid every year where people go on courses to find their purpose, to try to understand what are my talents, what are my strengths, what's my nature, how do I use my skills better, what motivates me, what are my abilities or values. All of these topics which people are literally paying millions of pounds or dollars to understand more about, we have tremendous insight on these topics within our own tradition. But we often don't dig into these understandings and don't draw upon them sufficiently to transform our own lives. So, behind all of this is this very simple idea. There's Chaitanya Charan. He does a podcast called the Monk's Podcast. I'm sure some of you have heard it before. And he interviews different people. There's one episode where he was interviewing Madhavananda, who's a disciple of Vrindaban Maharaj. And he says Madhavananda says something very, very interesting. He says that according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, before we come to understand who we are in the spiritual world, we have to first have a proper understanding of who we are in this world. Very interesting. And I started to reflect on it. How does that work? And I came to this understanding. We read in the Shashtakam, Cheto, Darpana, Marjana. It talks about cleansing the mirror of the heart, right? Or mind, heart, synonymous. What does that mean? It means that the more that mirror is clear, the more that we see reality. So when the mirror is clear to a certain extent, we can see this world, including our conditioned nature, more clearly. And as the mirror becomes more clear, then we eventually come to the point where we can understand who we are on that spiritual platform, our particular relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our eternal identity. So it's all part of that same journey. So we're meant to, as we go along this Krishna conscious journey, understand more about the vehicle that we are using for service. And we'll talk about that in relation to some statements by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in a moment. So, what does this allow us to do? If we get this correct, then we can literally be in the world, but untouched by the negativities of the world. Right? Very, very simple concept. This idea of living like a lotus. So it's present, but it's untouched by all the dirt around it, because it's actually above the situation itself. In order to do this, we want to touch upon one other thing, and this is very important for this seminar. As we go through this seminar, we're going to ask all of you to focus on the circle of influence. I want to draw this on the screen because it's a very important concept. And it's not just good for this seminar. This is good for everything that we do in our life, everything we do in our spiritual communities, and it's important for us as we go through this world in these bodies to really focus in on the difference between these two things. So here we have the circle of concern. And here we have the circle of influence. Two ways of living life. How many of you know devotees, let's be very honest, how many of you know devotees who instead of focusing on the circle of influence, which is the things that they can do something about, how many of you know devotees who focus primarily on the circle of concern? That's all the things that they don't like, but that they can't directly do anything about. Raise your hand if you know devotees who do that. Okay. Now, let's unpack that. Okay, this is really important for this seminar, and it's important for how we live in this world as devotees. What happens to a devotee who always focuses his or her attention purely on the things that are outside of their control? What happens to them? I saw your hand up.
They don't have any more time or energy to work on the circle.
Okay, so one thing is that they lose time and lose energy because they're focusing on all the things they can't do anything about, and they're losing that time and energy from the things that they can change. Absolutely. What else? Yes.
A lot of failure,
Okay, why a lot of failure?
because they can't do anything about their stuff.
Okay, so they have a history of failure because we're not really focusing on the things we can do something about, so we start to feel a certain way. I saw your hand up and come to a few others. I'm going to ask you, project your voice.
John.
Yes, John.
Victim of their own story.
Okay, tell me about the victim of their own story. What do you mean by that?
The victim, everything happens to them. They have no power. They become powerless.
Okay, they feel powerless, right? They're a victim of their own story, a lot of victim mentality. We often see that going on a lot right now. Thank you for sharing that. Who else had their hands up? Yes.
And turn into jana sangha, not substance.
Okay. Okay. The sangha, the quality of the association can be very, very negative, right? Absolutely. I'll go to the back and I'll come to this side. What else?
I was going to expand on that point. They tend to just criticize others rather than do something positive.
Absolutely. So a very critical, negative nature. And by the way, if I get into a critical mentality, it means my mentality is going into what mode? Ignorance and passion. Absolutely. So I'm bringing my own vibration, my own level of consciousness down as well. Was there a hand on this side? Yes. Okay. That's really important, by the way. Then when you said they become discouraged and depressed. So what happens is, if I become more discouraged and depressed, what happens to my drive? Does it go up or down?
Down.
Absolutely. It goes down. I'll take two more, and then we'll go on. Yes.
Loss of faith in the philosophy. That perhaps the path I'm on is wrong because everything looks wrong.
Absolutely. So they can lose faith in the philosophy. They can start to become disillusioned. Doubts can really strengthen. Absolutely. One more point. Yes, we'll do. Yeah. You go first.
Their vision is distorted
Okay. Tell me more. What do you mean?
because they're seeing things from an outer side that they don't really have a connection to, and it appears perhaps more this way or that way than actually it is.
Absolutely. So they don't see things clearly. And to your point, to add to your point, they miss all the things that they can do. Right? There's so much focus on all the things that they can't do and becoming disempowered like that, and they miss all the areas that they can change. We'll come to that second circle in a moment. You had a comment.
Excessive anxiety.
Yeah. Why would my focus on the things that I can't do anything about, why would that cause me excessive anxiety?
Think about global warming, and that's a whole collective, whole planet thing.
Mm-hmm.
And all I can do is probably do composting, installation. But if I'm so focused that the planet is going to go kaput, there's nothing I can really do as an individual about that.
Absolutely. So to your point, absolutely. If I focus on the things that I can't do anything about, I'm literally disempowering myself. So I want us all to think about this in our own lives. Because in many cases, we have sometimes at least where we focus on these areas of concern more than areas of influence. And to your point, to everything you shared, we are often sabotaging our own spiritual advancement when we do it. Okay, let's look at the opposite side. In an individual, I'm going to expand this, an individual or a community. Okay, I repeat that. Either an individual or a community, when people focus here, they focus on their circle of influence. They focus on the things that they can impact, the things that they can act on, the things that they can change. What happens to such individuals? Yes, I saw your hand up.
You're able to see how Krishna is more present in your life, your day-to-day life.
First of all, that's really important for us. We can start to see Krishna's hand in what's going on for us. Absolutely. So definitely, if I focus on the things that I can influence, I can definitely become more Krishna conscious because I'm bringing my consciousness more to the mode of goodness, which facilitates my Krishna consciousness. What else happens if I focus on the things I can change?
So when you were talking about those 3 points, so this is the good time when you actually use your knowledge and you can actually implement it in a real action. Yeah. If let's say we can stop the hurricane, yeah, and instead of going and seeing news about it, we can group up and help the people who are affected.
Absolutely. So we can apply our talents, skills, knowledge practically to make something happen. Absolutely. I saw a hand at the back.
So as an individual, as a part of a community, if they're working together, there's a force of inertia, motivation to work together, to prove things that are around them.
Just on that point, raise your hand. How many of you have seen that? When devotees come together and they believe we can actually do something, that things get some momentum going. Okay, absolutely. And when that momentum's going, how does that feel? Absolutely. Look, we're here at a men's conference, and we're looking at this idea of empowerment, transformation. Just this simple one exercise. If this was done across our global communities, thinking about why we should focus not just on the things we are concerned about, but why we should focus on what we can do about it, you would see overnight a massive change in energy, skills, ability. And by the way, when we as a community are focused on the things that we can actually do something about, does the gossip go down or up? Goes down. Now isn't that interesting? Why, if I'm part of a community and we're focused on the things we can actually do something about, why does it cause me to have less gossip? Why? Yeah. I'm asked to project your voice.
You work together as a team, and you have love, and with love you don't judge.
Absolutely. When we're working together as a team, there's this saying that the devil makes work for idle minds, right? Or an idle mind is the devil's workshop. One of the biggest issues that we have throughout our communities is a lack of positive engagement. When there is insufficient positive engagement, what happens is it leaves all of your energy, talents, abilities, skills unengaged. And if they're not engaged by Krishna service, who else will engage your talents, skills, and abilities? Maya. See? Very, very clear. It's only 2 options, right? It's a binary situation. If I'm not engaging what I have in Krishna's service, guaranteed, the negative version will be engaged, right? Rather than speaking about Krishna, I'll be criticizing the Vaishnavas. Rather than building the community, I'll be complaining about what everyone else is doing. What else happens if I'm an individual or a community that focuses on my circle of influence? Because we were looking at men's empowerment here. What happens if we are focused on the things that we can do something about?
The circle of influence expands.
That's interesting. I was looking for that. But now tell me why. Why would a focus on the things that I can do something about increase my influence?
If we're a group working together on a project, that project can touch other people who may be interested, and there we grow the community.
Absolutely. Anything else?
As we become more skilled at what we're doing, we get more responsibility and more trust. So then we can do more, we can get more tasks.
Absolutely. I just want to touch upon that, especially that'll come to the back. Absolutely. If I'm focused on the things that I can do, I'm going to have some impact. And if I have some impact, people are going to see, oh wow, this is amazing. This person, what he or she's doing is having an impact. They're making a difference. Now, I've got some reason I want to work with them. I want to connect with them. I trust them. I see that they have a proactive, can-do attitude. And that attitude means that they're achieving something, and your achievement now inspires me to want to support you. So definitely you can draw the attention. I saw a hand at the back.
You completed my thought.
Oh, okay, no problem at all. Absolutely.
If you're fully engaged, blissfully in Krishna consciousness, you will inspire others to follow your path.
I wouldn't share an additional experience. This is a personal experience of mine. I found that in times of my spiritual life where I was really focused on what I could achieve or what I could contribute, that it made it easier to handle the tests and challenges from Maya. Okay, can anyone relate to that? That because someone is focused on the things that they can contribute, even when there are tests coming from Maya, it's easier to pass those tests. Can anyone relate to that? Okay, but why would it be the case? Yes? Definitely a more in the mode of goodness. That's true, because the mode of goodness means knowledge. It also means activity. But it means the 2 things together in a healthy balance. Why else?
Too busy to be
distracted by noise.
Very powerful point. Yes, I was speaking, we had a youth retreat here, wonderfully arranged by, or facilitated by the organizers here. 270 youth were here. This was, when was it? It was August, beginning of August. And I was thinking, when I was looking at the youth, I was thinking back to my own youth in Krishna consciousness. I was thinking, what do the youth need? Youth have passion, right? There's so much energy in their body. They can stay up all night, it makes no difference. So what do they need? They need a lot of engagement. Just saying to them sit down and just read Prabhupada's books forever. It's not going to work. There's so much youthful energy, so it needs an outlet. And if it's not given a healthy spiritual outlet, it's going to come out in some other ways. The more we look at this topic, the more we see that there's a real science to this Krishna consciousness. And it goes back to what I said right at the beginning of the seminar. It's not the teachings which are the issue. If you dig into this in practically any community around the world, or any individual, it's not the philosophy, it's the misapplication of the philosophy which becomes problematic. So we have to always remember this. We want to focus on what we can do. And this is also going to be the focus for our seminar. What I mean by that is very simple. As we discuss the subject matter of this topic, I want you to constantly think, what can I do? How can I apply this in my own particular life? So we're going to be personal about the practice. Yeah? Any other reason why, if I focus on the circle of influence, that it gets bigger? Yes, I saw a hand at the back.
Because when you are engaged in your consciousness, it projects outward.
Absolutely.
And everybody, including yourself, is always looking to others. And when they look to you and you're at your effulgence,
Yes.
at the pinnacle, they get inspired.
Yes.
And that inspiration is contagious and that expands your circle.
I love that point. And I'll just put it another way. That means actually, if we're not focused on the things that we can change, we're actually doing a disservice to the entire community, and we're doing a disservice to Srila Prabhupada's movement. Because I love that point. There's a term for this, actually. They talk about social contagion. That you can have a philosophy that becomes contagious, a certain way of thinking that becomes contagious, and we have to be that in a positive spiritual sense for the world. I saw a couple of hands here, and I'll come over to that side. I saw Elizabeth's hand. Yourself first, Chaitanya.
Yeah, the circle of influence begins to grow because now you're creating a network of like-minded people. So I'm doing my influence, you're doing yours, I'm doing yours. If we're connected like we are, it's not or something, then it just makes that like a ripple effect. It just goes and goes and goes and goes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I first learned about this topic, I saw how much I was sabotaging my own spiritual life. I'll be very transparent. I saw how many times I put my energy here, and no one touched upon it, but I'll just touch on it, and the frustration that came by putting my energy in this direction. And I saw by contrast that the more I was able to shift in this direction, it was like night and day, and it's exactly what you said. That sense of networking, vibrating, resonating with other people who are thinking, what can we do about it? I heard a story, and it was about a very unfortunate situation in human history, the concentration camps, right, Nazi Germany, and how many people were dying and being killed, etc., and how there were certain people who were able to escape. And it was very, very interesting. For many people, as they were, seeing their relatives being killed, and they were thinking, when will I be next, right? Or when are they going to take me out and kill me? And certain people who escaped, it was a very interesting account by one individual who said that he realized that he had to ask himself a different question. Very interesting statement. He said, I realized that I needed to ask myself a different question. Instead of asking, when am I going to die? The question I needed to be asking myself is, how can I escape? And it's very, very interesting. We talk about questions and answers. We look at our tradition. Arjuna asking questions to Krishna, Bhagavad Gita. Right? We have, Srila Bhagavatam, Vriksa Maharaj asking questions to Shukadeva Goswami. We have Chaitanya Charitamrita. Ramananda Roy is asking questions to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Goswamis are inquiring from him, etc. We also don't recognize that we also do this. Not just externally, But we do this inside ourselves. We ask ourselves certain questions. And the caliber of the questions determines where our life goes. So we need to be asking ourselves the right questions which relate to the circle of influence. What can I do? How can I make the situation better? What are the opportunities for me to bring things to a higher standard? I saw your hand up and I'll go to Anutama. Yes?
So eventually the circle of influence covers all aspects of ourselves, physical, emotional, intellectual, and all aspects of our life, professional, personal, and spiritual. So then everything we do is in that state of consciousness, covers all of it.
Absolutely. See, it has a positive impact upon us at all levels, physical, mental, emotional. We'll come back to that in a moment, so I have a slide about that. Anutama.
Just a real practical thing why the circle increases is because your boss or your authority is saying, well, this person gets things done. So take on this bigger job, take on this bigger, now I can budget this bigger job.
Yeah, absolutely. So give you more responsibility. See, people who have positions of authority and who have additional responsibility may give that to us as well. Thank you. Yes.
And the big boss, Krishna, he does the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a very important point. The wages of service is more service, actually. So a good sign is that we're thinking in the right way, the influence is increasing at all levels, and therefore we're being offered more opportunity to purify ourselves and move forward. So, as we go through the seminar, we're going to ask all of you to stay in that circle of influence. And I invite you, not just in the seminar, this one thing, if you remember nothing else from the seminar, if we just lived our Krishna conscious life from this position, I guarantee you your entire spiritual life would accelerate. Just this one thing. Let's take it a step on. So, this circle of concern versus circle of influence, if we're doing this properly, it means we focus on the endeavor. The result, we know from Bhagavad Gita, is up to who? Absolutely. And by the way, I just want to just explain that. Because again, sometimes we hear these things and we think, yeah, that's nice in theory, but the reality is something different. No, the result is up to Krishna. For example, how many of you came here, how many of you took over 3 hours to get here? Okay. Now, how many of you came here by driving? How many of you flew in? Okay. Now, if I drive or if I fly into a particular destination, am I the only factor that's responsible for me getting here? No. Okay. Are there factors outside of my control that determine if I can or cannot arrive? Yes. Absolutely. So everything we do is based upon so many different factors which are not directly within our control. So just in terms of, I need to mention this at the beginning, so in my day-to-day work, we train leaders. The company I work for has 300,000 staff in over 62 countries. It's a global organization. So within that population, we have 50,000 managers. And the area that we work in is all about how to train those managers to be better leaders of people, to get the best out of the people that they're leading. My colleague is a business psychologist, and he shared something very interesting. I can send you the research if you're interested in this as well. He said something that really, when I heard that, I thought, wow, but just see what Prabhupada and Krishna is saying. He pointed out, they've done studies. So they've done studies to look at people who are successful. And then what they tried to do is correlate. Was it because of their talent? Was it because of their effort? Was it because of something else? So you can use statistical analysis to correlate and find out what was the driving force. And what they found was, talent's important, absolutely. They found that effort is important, absolutely. But they found that there's a greater correlation when they look at successful people, people who've achieved external big things. They found that there's a greater correlation between luck and success than there is between talent and success, and a greater correlation between luck and success than there is between effort and success. So you may work really hard, you may be very talented, but if someone else has better karma than you, or more of Krishna's mercy, the outcomes will be more for that person than for you. And it doesn't mean that, he's not working hard. See, sometimes because people don't have the scriptural knowledge, they can jump to all the wrong conclusions. But there's empirical research on this topic. I actually have the research. There's empirical research on this topic. And does anyone remember where in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna talks about the different factors of action? And how many factors of action does he talk about? There's 5. And one of them is Divan, right? Divan is sometimes translated as fortune, ultimately it means who? It's Krishna. He is the single most important factor for any outcome. We can make the endeavor, we can have the skills or use whatever skills we have, but actually it's Krishna who's the ultimate factor. And there's empirical research to back all of this up. Although it's not mainstream, because if it was mainstream, people wouldn't go on these courses where they can be promised that if you do my course and pay me thousands of pounds and use my formula, that automatically you're going to be successful. Yeah? The most important factor for our success, for any success, is Krishna, which is exactly what our tradition states again and again. Let's move on. So this is our situation. We first of all start at the bottom. We're in an environment where there's constant movement. Things are always happening. Different challenges, different events, different circumstances. To give a very classic example for us now in the modern world, we had the pandemic. Okay? No one was expecting the pandemic. Right? I had some friends who opened a restaurant in January 2020. Their restaurant was closed, I think, the next month. They done all the marketing, got the money, advertising, everything. The restaurant had actually opened. The restaurant closed down the next month. They put some talent into it. There was massive effort behind it. But there was that third factor, which is Krishna, Daiva, which said, actually, by the way, there's no restaurants that are going to be opening anytime soon. Right? We're not going to have any customers anytime soon. So we're in that kind of environment. Above the environment is the senses. Our senses are affected by the environment, often dragged in different directions by the environment. Unfortunately, this is now even worse, because with social media, the senses can be impacted even more. I saw an article on the BBC website, and the article was about what they call persuasive design. So, how many of you have a WhatsApp? Okay, so how many of you notice that when someone is sending you a message on WhatsApp, you'll see a sentence that says so-and-so is typing or so-and-so is recording an audio message, right? You see that? Anyone think it's by accident? No. So I'll explain how this works. When these apps are designed, they're designed by psychologists. And the psychologists are told by the company, make me an app that will cause massive addiction, right? That will cause my customers to keep using the same technology. So when you see those sentences that someone is typing or someone is sending an audio message or recording a message, it's to create a sense of anticipation that you're about to receive something. Whenever you feel that you're about to receive something, a certain hormone is released in your body. The hormone begins with the letter D. Any guesses? Dopamine. So dopamine is the hormone that relates to reward. So whenever you see that you're about to get some message on your app, it releases dopamine in your body, and that dopamine, it creates a habit. It's habit forming. So then, without meaning to, and it's not happening consciously, it happens on a subconscious basis. Subconsciously, you're more likely to keep using that particular app. Okay? So, in the world that we live in now, our senses are under even more pressure from the environment because of the way the technology is. I'll share with you one other thing. When you first wake up in the morning, your brain is in a slightly altered state of awareness. Like now we're in the room, when we're speaking, your brainwaves are in what they call a beta state, which means you're alert. When you first wake up, for the first few minutes of being awake, your brainwaves go into what we call an alpha state. In that alpha state, you are 5 times more receptive to whatever is going on. So, let's go back to technology. So, technology, the technology companies, the mobile phone companies, for your convenience, because they're so selfless and they care about you so much. What particular function have they put on your phone to help you in the mornings? Your mobile phone alarm. So what happens is you've just woken up, and the first thing you do is you reach out to your phone. And because your brain is in an alpha state at that time, and the first thing that you reach out to is your phone, you're more likely to do what throughout the day?
Check your messages.
To check your messages, to use your phone. Again, designed to make you more addicted to the technology. That is why I started doing this recently. I use a watch for an alarm, because I know that just by doing that one thing, it will reduce the amount of times I'm constantly checking my phone. Something to think about. So, environment, senses, then we have the mind. So, what does Krishna say? Maivam so jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shishtanindriyani prakriti shtani kashti. Mana means mind, shishtani means six, indriyani means the senses. He says the six senses including the mind. The mind is actually the sixth sense. Through the other senses, impressions are made on the mind. So, if we are able to engage or spiritualize this, the intelligence, then through the intelligence you can control the mind, and through the mind you can control the senses. And if you're able to control the senses, you're able to navigate through what better? Environment. In other words, if we don't spiritualize the intelligence sufficiently, you'll be a slave of the senses and a slave of the environment. It is a fact that every single one of us actually have a different level of free will. It's not all the same. Some of us in the room right now have more free will, and some of us in the room right now have less free will, and it all is dependent upon what we're doing at the level of the intelligence and the mind. And ultimately, by spiritualizing the intelligence, the mind, and the senses, we're able to start to awaken our real spiritual identity and to live as a soul, even though we are in the world. Okay? This is a situation at hand for us. What we're trying to do, and especially when we talk about talents, is to move towards dynamic and healthy balance. The mode of goodness is dynamic balance. I want to show you how this works. This is something you can use in your life. I made a major mistake in my spiritual life in 2010. Up until that point, I had so much energy, huge amounts of energy. And so I thought to myself, I've got so much energy, I can push my body even more. Okay? I don't know if anyone's ever had that mistake in their life at all. So, the mistake I made was I pushed my body so much that I then got into a state where I had literally, this actually mark is not the right one. That's why we learned this through experience. But I made such a mistake, okay, that I pushed my body, and and from that point, I went into many years where I was just tired all the time. So like chronic fatigue. And it got me thinking. It started on the journey of trying to figure out, why did this happen? What was I meant to learn from it? What could I do differently? And when I started to get into this, I understood more about the modes, more about the mode of goodness, and I understood that the mode of goodness is rhythmic. And I want to actually draw this for you, if we can, in a moment. I'll draw this here. Because when we talk about the idea of empowerment, when we talk about the idea of transformation, it has a lot to do with using or playing the long game. So, this is how the mode of goodness works. The mode of goodness first dips down. With the mode of goodness, the first thing you do is you pay some price. Who's heard that point before? Where does that come from? That the mode of goodness begins with some price you have to pay. Where's that from? Bhagavad Gita. And what is it that Krishna says about the mode of goodness? It begins like poison. So you always begin by paying some price. But after paying that price, then it goes up. Right? So you get the nectar after that time. But the mode of goodness being rhythmic, it acts like this. This is actually how someone lives their life in the mode of goodness. What it means is very simple. It means action and then recharge. In fact, here, it's not just recharge, it's recharge and reflect. So I've done some activity, and then I start to recharge, I reflect on the activity. When I reflect on the activity, what does it allow me to do? Raise your hand up. Raise your hand up. Yes. Perspective. It gives you perspective. What else? I've done some activity now. I recharge and reflect. What else does it allow me to do?
Improve your performance.
Improves my performance next time. So you can see this in this diagram. So I recharge, but the next time I act, it's even better because I'm taking all the lessons from my previous circle of activity. So when we train managers, I was speaking to one class of about 30 managers recently. We were delivering some training. And one of the managers, she was telling the class that what she does, her team, they do regular reviews. Okay? Reviews means that every time we do a project, a service, a particular initiative, after we'll review and find out what worked well. What did we do that was good so we can reinforce it? And we'll also find out what mistakes did we make, what could we do differently, so that the next time we do the project, it's far more efficient, far more effective, far more successful. Now, just take a moment to think about that. Do we do that in our communities, yes or no? Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. Another question. Do we do this in our lives as individuals? Interesting. Interesting. Some of us will, sometimes. Many of us don't do that. So that means if we're thinking about our life, if we're not using this rhythmic cycle, it means there's some degree that we're not living aligned to goodness. So we may engage in some activity, we don't reflect on it. We may engage in some activity, we don't sufficiently recharge. I'll be very honest, sometimes you'll see this in morning class. People are there, the speaker's speaking about the Bhagavatam, and because the person hasn't sufficiently recharged, what happens? They're just asleep. So the class is going on. You're actually hearing from Srila Prabhupada, you're hearing from Shukadev Goswami, you're hearing from Pariksit Maharaj, you're hearing from Vidura, Maitreya Muni, you're hearing from the Pandavas, and we're asleep. And because we're asleep, we don't get the full benefits. So the mode of goodness is actually rhythmic. So this is the idea of healthy but dynamic balance. It's not just balance, it's a balance that's constantly moving, but the overall tendency or trend is positive. Right? And this is really important. That dynamic balance helps us to move a situation in a positive direction. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he aligns with this particular point about the importance of using our mind in a way which is helpful. So basically the translation is the following. The translation is the following. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Bhagavad Gita 6:5. When we talk about using talents, it's one of the ways in which we can harness the mind. Talents, skills, abilities, they are one of the ways in which we can harness the mind. We all have needs. Who's heard of this term, spiritual bypass? Anyone heard of that term before? Okay. Anuradha, what does that term mean, spiritual bypass?
Are you using spiritual examples to explain sometimes material situations, or not necessarily that taking the shelter of a spiritual approach to defend a particular bad behavior?
That's definitely one part of it. Anything else, spiritual bypass, what else have you heard it to mean? Yes?
Spiritual bypassing is not dealing with the material situation and just saying that we bypass it up and go to the spiritual purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll repeat that because I want everyone to hear. Spiritual bypassing, and it happens a lot, unfortunately, is where we have some real situations, some real issues that we're not dealing with in the name of, I'm transcendental to that, right? I don't think the fact that I've got anger issues, it doesn't matter, I'm a devotee, right? We're all above that. One thing that really changed my reading of Prabhupada's books, I was listening to a seminar on the Harinam Chintamani. And when I was listening to the seminar, one of the things which were pointed out, and I went back to research and confirm it, was that often if you read Prabhupada's books, when Prabhupada uses the term devotee, often he actually means pure devotee. So sometimes you'll read Prabhupada will say things like the devotee is above the modes of material nature. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely not in that category, right? I definitely get affected by the modes. So when I came across that, it was absolutely amazing. I could start to see why there was misapplication. Because I started to see that people were reading the books and we were misunderstanding what was being said in those actual books. We were reading certain statements which apply to devotees at a certain level of advancement, and we were thinking it applies to all the devotees at all levels. And that can be really damaging to our spiritual advancement because we're reading, but we're not actually understanding what we read properly. So, the reason why I share this is because we go through the human experience en route to becoming transcendental. Okay? This is really important to understand. For example, someone's a grahasta. It means that we identify with certain human needs, which are facilitated by being in the ashram as we move on that journey for transcendence. So I just want to touch upon this idea that when we look at needs, there's also a difference between our needs and our wants. So here, for example, someone may say that they want riches, but actually what they're looking for, the more sattvic version, the deeper essence, is they're looking for fulfillment. Someone may say, I want prestige, but when you look a bit more deeply into it, they're looking for recognition and acceptance. So if we start to dig in, if we start to look a bit deeper into our lives, we start to see that what we're looking for it tends to be of a much more subtle nature. Another way of looking at this is the following. And I'm going to ask you to do an exercise on this as well, because I like to use these frameworks because then we can see where am I strong in my spiritual life and where are the opportunities for me to improve. So I'll share with you something that I'm thinking about. I was thinking, and I'm sure this can be done to be honest, we don't gamble. Let's put the disclaimer out there. But if we did gamble, I bet you could easily create some kind of assessment so that when people come to Krishna consciousness, if you get them to do the assessment, you could probably figure out very easily where will Maya attack this particular individual. Very easily. If you know them well enough, you could probably figure out these are the areas where this individual is strong, and these are the areas where they're more likely to have some challenges in the ISKCON community. It could be done very, very easily. One of the ways in which you can do it is through this particular model. I believe this model for needs came from a Christian priest, but we're going to use it because it's definitely relevant to us. So this Christian priest talks about 6 types of fundamental needs that people have. And what I've seen in our communities is when certain needs are not sufficiently met, it creates an opening, a door through which Maya can come in. You see? So I want us to do a little exercise where we reflect upon these 6 needs. So I'm gonna go through them. I'm gonna ask you to write down a scoring for yourself, okay? And the scoring will be out of 10. 10 means that I feel that this need is met in my life phenomenally well, right? Optimally. So 10 is best. So for example, this first one, security. So we're looking at how much we feel psychological and physical safety within our community. Okay?
In your own life or
your own life. So you're looking at, you're scoring out of 10 for yourself in relation to the community you're part of. Okay? So, if I feel in my spiritual circle, let's say, community, relationships, friendships, whatever it is, that there's a great sense of security. I feel that I can trust the people around me, they're not going to harm me in any way. And when we're talking about this, is 2 sides, both physical and psychological. Okay? So it's not just about the body, but it's also about the mind, the emotions, etc. So give a rating out of 10 for how much you feel a sense of safety in your current relationship with devotees and community. That's the first one. Second, significance. To what extent do you feel appreciated and that you have a strong sense of purpose? You have a strong sense that I know will I can contribute in my current devotee circle, let's say. Give a rating out of 10 for that one. Third one, Prabhupada speaks to this. He said, if you don't feel a taste in Krishna consciousness, you'll be forced to get the taste from where? The mind. Right? And Krishna talks about this also. He talks about this higher taste. If we don't feel a sense of satisfaction in our communities, how many of you have seen that? How many of you have seen someone, they weren't feeling satisfied, so they started to drift away? Who's seen that happen? Okay. I think we all have. So what we're saying, this is not rocket science. This is stuff that we've read before, we've heard before, but we may not have applied it so much before. So the third one, what's your current level of satisfaction in your Krishna consciousness? Okay? Again, 10 is optimal. There's no wrong answers. What we're trying to do with this exercise is to be very honest and understand where am I right now on my journey. Okay? So that's why I'm asking you to do this. The next one, self-expression. This is also related to our topic, expressing our unique talents in the purpose for which they were created. So guidance is often useful here. So how much do I feel that I have an ability to express myself, express my thoughts, my feelings, my talents, my skills, my gifts at this time? Give a rating out of 10 in that area. Next one is spiritual direction. So that means I'm able to get the proper direction for my spiritual growth. Again, give a rating out of 10. 10 is optimal. That may mean mentors. It may mean good guidance because there's lots of good teaching, knowledge sharing, whatever it is. If you good shastric study, whatever it is. Where are you in this area at the moment? And the last one is socialization. Okay, so socialization in relationship with the world, with each other, a sense of belonging, that I feel I'm part of a wider community, a wider body, a wider network, a wider set of relationships, friendships, whatever it is. For those who are married, this is also take into account your relationship with your family, your children, your partner, etc. Where are you in that scale? Again, 10 is optimal, and the reason why we do this, and I often do this, not the same framework, but I often do this kind of exercise when I'm training managers or leaders, is because it's a very good way to immediately see where am I scoring well, right? There'll be some of these areas where you scored quite high, and you feel like that's a real strength. But there'll be some of these areas where you didn't score so high. And then the question there is, in the areas where I did not score so high, what can I, going back to the circle of influence, what can I actually do about it? Okay? We're going to go into that exercise right now. So you've done this activity. We're going to ask you to pair up in a moment. This time, I'm going to ask you to pair up with someone in the room that you don't know so well. So you're going to have to move around, okay? I'm going to ask you in a moment to pair up with someone in the room that you do not know so well. And what I'm going to ask you to do is share two things. One, and you're going to, within this, you share whatever you're comfortable in sharing. But share at least one area where you feel you scored highly. And then share with your partner, why did you score so high in this area, right? What is it about either you or the community that you're part of that allowed you to score high in that particular area? And this is to give your partner ideas. This is to exchange ideas on how we can strengthen that particular area. Then I'm also going to ask you to share with your partner, where was there a low score? Okay? And based upon that low score, what are some ideas that you can bounce off each other as to what you can do to make it stronger? Does that make sense? I'm going to repeat that one more time. You're going to share where you scored high and why it's such a high score. What was it about you or your community or your interaction that makes it a high score, so you can share, so you can see what makes it work? And one area where you did not score so high that you would like to focus on. Okay? And with that area, you're going to share, okay, self-expression wasn't so high for me, and then you're going to bounce off your partner, you're going to both share some ideas on how to make that area of your spiritual life stronger. Because what we find is what allows us to endure in Krishna consciousness, and not just endure, what allows us to contribute is when we can contribute from a position of strength. So through this exercise, we can see where the strengths are, and we can also see some areas that we may need to give a bit more attention to so we can remain strong and consistent in our Krishna consciousness. Does that make sense, first of all? Okay, so pair up with someone in the room that you don't know so well. We'll give you about 5-6 minutes to just share your ideas and we'll go back. Please begin.
I know you.
Feel free to move around if you need to. Someone that you don't know so well in the room.
It's not bad. I think it's really good. It's even better than 2 minutes.
you're all completely balanced and you transcended that, right? So, Bhuta Bhavana is going to take another 10 minutes till 1:45, and then we'll go down for lunch. We still have plenty of time. We actually allowed an hour and a half for lunch extra because we thought we might need some adjustment. So he's going to go until 1:45, then we'll walk on to lunch.
Thank you very much. So I will just say a few additional pieces. So first of all, this kind of exercise, we encourage you to continue to do it. What I mean by that is you can take different frameworks from the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and start to actually evaluate yourself to see where you are in these areas, and then you can see from that what are some opportunities for me to actually work on, to improve, etc. We really need these three things. First of all, we need the connection to Krishna. This is why we chant, this is the whole idea of Krishna consciousness, that we want to have that connection through service, through relationship. But Krishna does not act alone. We need the connection to the devotees. So the relationships with Vaishnavas, the Priti Lakshana, the 6 loving exchanges are essential. What we often don't touch upon so much is that we also need a healthy relationship with ourselves. What I've seen is that to the extent that we don't have a healthy relationship with ourselves, it spills over into our relationship with others, and it can also affect our relationship with Krishna. Sometimes, for example, a devotee has been brought up in an environment where there was issues with their parents. So they brought up with some kind of distrust towards authority. And because there's some issues with authority, that then spills over into their relationship with their spiritual master, and it can also spill over into their relationship with Krishna. So all three areas are important. There was a very interesting conversation, I heard this on the podcast, and someone was asking this world-renowned expert, he's a world-renowned expert and physician and so on, and they were talking to him about loving children and bringing up children. And so he was talking about how children need love, etc. Prabhupada will often say this, right? 0 to 5, you treat them like a prince. And then 5 to 15, you treat them like a servant. And 16 onwards, you treat them like a friend. That's also mentioned in Ayurveda, by the way. That's not just, that Chanakya mentions that, Prabhupada mentions that, but that's actually based upon Ayurvedic understanding of child psychology. So between the ages of 0 to 5, whatever the parents do to the child, you're basically programming their subconscious mind. One thing, if anyone's interested in this topic, if you look online, Prabhupada Memories, DVD number 77, you can find it on YouTube. There's a lady, Prabhupada disciple, her name's Kishori Mataji. She's speaking, she was present when Prabhupada was giving instructions about how they should bring up the children. He says something very interesting. He says when they're very young, like very young, not forever, but when they're very young, you never tell them no. He said if the child wants to do something and it's not good for them, you just distract them by giving them something else. And Prabhupada also explained why, which is so interesting. He said if you do that, then the child will grow into an adult who's very confident. Isn't that interesting? And I studied this whole thing from Ayurveda, what it just says about child psychology, because I wanted to understand how does that work. So the way it works is the following. What's happening to the child when they're very young creates the samskars. Not just samskars, it creates their subconscious samskars. So when the child is very young and they want something, if they kept being told, no, you can't have it, then you create the subconscious samskar that what you want to achieve, you can't do it. That child becomes the adult who lacks confidence. Because what is confidence? Confidence is the attitude that what I want to achieve, I can achieve. Isn't that interesting? So what often happens in our modern society, because we're not aware of these subtle things, which Prabhupada knows. Again, like I said, don't take my word for it. Memories of Prabhupada, if you put in Memories of Prabhupada, number 77, her name's Kishori Mataji, I think it's 6 minutes into that particular pastime and Prabhupada Memories, she talks about what Prabhupada said and why he said it. It's so interesting. That, as I said, that's also in Ayurveda. Also, that's the reason why when the child is very young, they just need lots of unconditional love. What we have now in the modern world, so many people now lack self-esteem. But it's often due to what happened to them when they were children. And the amazing thing is, the parents didn't even realize they were doing it. Very, very interesting. This is why this Vedic knowledge is so powerful, because it gives you very, very subtle mechanisms that you can't necessarily perceive in a gross way. Yeah, anyway, that's aside. So we need this connection with ourselves. And really, this is just bringing this through to the end. This is why abilities are so important. So there's many different statements in the scriptures. Prabhupada will talk about abilities and so on, but Krishna himself in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 text number 8, he says, I'm the ability in a person. One of the ways in which we can actually achieve so many of these things, right? A sense of significance, satisfaction, self-expression, socialization, is to offer our gifts back to Krishna. It's very, very interesting if you think about it. In our tradition, we understand that Krishna manifests as a spiritual master, right? The Guru is the external representative of Krishna. Krishna manifests in terms of the holy name, right? We know that Krishna manifests in the form of the deity, the Archa Vigraha. But also, according to his own statement, he manifests also in terms of the skills, talents, and abilities within each and every one of us. Just take a moment to think about this. What would our ISKCON communities be like if tomorrow everyone just paused for 5 minutes and just thought to themselves, what are the gifts and talents that Krishna has given me? Think about that carefully. Would it make a difference to the movement? What do you think? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, let's take it a step further. If people engage the gifts and talents that they have, do other people notice that? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So not only is the person now feeling a sense of, let's go back, a sense of satisfaction because they're able to use something that they're able to use, it's noticed by other people. So now that helps me to build relationship with other people. I know so many devotees, they're good at cooking, right? So you come and take you come to Prasadam, and the moment you put something in your mouth, you think, this is incredible. Who cooked this stuff, right? And so you're now starting to build relationship in that sense. What we have in our movement is such deep teachings. So again, at work, when we train managers, we usually train them, and in our programs, they'll do some kind of personality assessment. One example of a personality assessment is called Gallup Strengths Finder. Has anyone heard of that assessment before? I'm just curious. Okay, one or two of you. So the whole premise of this assessment is that when you ask the questions, it will tell you what your natural talents are. And what they found in the research is that in an organization where you just focus on what people are not good at, and you tell them you're not good at this, you need to improve, then the engagement, that means how much people feel inspired to serve, it goes up by about 10%. That's when you just focus on what people are not good at. Now they did also empirical research, and they said, what about if we focus on what people's strengths are? And they found that if you have an organization which focuses on what people are good at and engages them according to their gifts or their talents, they found that the engagement in that organization goes up by over 70%. And again, don't take my word for it. Gallup is a global organization. You can look up online. You'll see all this research for yourself. Right? So we actually train managers and we talk about this. And so the idea is to understand what are the skills, talents, and abilities of the people around you. What are your skills, talents, and abilities? And if we know that, then we can leverage it. Now, let's be very clear. That doesn't mean that we only do what we like. I want to be very clear on that. In any community, there will be times where we do need to do the needful. There will be times where there are emergencies. However, and this is really important, if I'm using my talents and skills when I can, does it make it easier or harder for me to do the needful? What do you think?
Easier.
It makes it easier. This is what I saw. I was studying this many, many years. I saw something really incredible. And it goes back to this whole point that we talked about earlier, this circle of concern versus circle of influence. I saw that what happens in the life of many devotees is that there are so many things that you can't control. Things may happen to us health-wise, things may happen to us work-wise, and so on. But what we fail to do often as a community and individuals is to really lean into the things that we can do something about. Talents, skills, abilities are things that we can recognize. They're things that we can utilize. And if we do that, then what happens is it's just like a scale. On one side, I've got all the things that I can't control. On the other side, I've got all the things that I can actually leverage. And our job is to help to have that balance. By utilizing the skills, talents, and abilities that I can use, it makes it easier for me to handle the things in life which are outside of my control. Okay? So we want you to do one last exercise. We'll just check where our timing is. Okay, we are at time. I'll ask you to do this as homework. Okay? And I'll ask you to do this as homework, and if anyone has any questions on this seminar, what we will do is you can ask the questions. I'll give morning class tomorrow at the temple. And if you have any questions from this seminar or the class tomorrow, when we come to the questions and answers, feel free to bring them up at that particular time. So I don't want to leave it in that sense. But what I want you to do is two things. Between now and tomorrow, two things I want you to do as homework. So write this down to make sure that you don't forget. The first thing is write down what are the manifestations of Krishna within me right now. Meaning, how is Krishna showing up in me in the form of different talents, skills, and abilities? And don't be shy about it, because you're not saying that your talents are not you. Those talents are manifestations of Krishna. So how is Krishna manifesting in me in the form of different abilities, talents, and skills? As he said, not my words, I am the ability in man. He says that. So that's one thing. And by the way, when you think about that, don't think about it in terms of just external things. Some of you are very good at supporting other people. That's a talent. Some of you are very good at encouraging people. It's a talent. Some of you are very good at picking up how people are feeling. It's a talent. Some of you are good at picking up details. It's a talent. Some of you can think outside the box and be creative. It's a talent. So when you say talent, think about this as broadly as possible. It's not just like, I've got like an IQ of 200, that's the only thing. Anything that you find is a talent or ability, big or small, that Krishna's pulling in you, that's one thing. The second thing is, between now and tomorrow, and actually I'm going to ask you to do it within the next hour, at some point within the next hour, share with someone else here who attended the seminar, share with them one practical takeaway from the session. Okay? It goes back to what we said right at the beginning of the session. The easiest way to learn anything is to do what? Is to teach it. Okay? So when you start to share, okay, off the back of the seminar, this is one practical thing I'm going to do differently. It greatly increases the likelihood that you will follow through. It goes back to, and we'll end on this point, it goes back to this exercise that we did right at the beginning. The reason why we did this exercise is it brings out from our subconscious mind. I repeat, it brings out from our subconscious mind where we may feel that there's some things that we really should be doing that we're not doing. Okay? And we can utilize our talents in moving in that direction. For some of you, the deepest regret would have been, you know what, there's certain people I didn't speak to. There's certain grudges that I didn't resolve. For others, it may be a particular project. I could have done more for Prabhupada. There's a skill, a talent, an ability that's inside me that I'm not using. Right? For someone else, it may be that, you know what, I need to get into the teachings more, or I need to go into the deeper aspects of Krishna consciousness. The reason we do these things is to really help to bring out from deep in our subconscious mind, what are those real things that are important to me, and how do I start to practically make sure I put that into my life or move in that direction now? Because as we said at the beginning of the seminar, we have 7 days, right? Every single one of us, will be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday that we will leave the world, and we want to leave at a time where we're ready to embrace Krishna and go back to the spiritual world, rather than coming back into this world because we have so much unresolved, unfinished business. Okay? So thank you very much. I know there's a lot that we covered, but thank you for your time.
So tomorrow there won't be class, there will only be questions and answers. And Bhuta Bhavana, he's come directly from London, so he's still on a different time zone. But I'm sure he'll be around most of the time. If you catch him, you can also have some conversations privately with him or in a group, whatever. So it's 10 minutes to 2. We're going to come back here at 3 o'clock for our next session. And I mentioned earlier,